Now, obviously, a lot of this is just internet nonsense and has very little bearing on reality as it is, but things that seem silly now are probably going to be real in 5 years. Let's start with the new tribe emerging on the right. I call it post-racial fascism. This has been called a lot of things, one of which is racial depolarization, which is just the idea that you can't reliably hope for the ethnic vote to go to the Democrats anymore. Trump won big with ethnic minorities, and this is weird because, you know, Trump was called a fascist a lot. And I would like to propose that Trump actually is a fascist, but that fascism doesn't have to be racist or be unappealing towards ethnic minorities. I mean, someone like Kash Patel, who is actively saying...
Wait, is he doing a serious video? Is this a serious video?
...that they're going to use the power of the state to persecute my political opponents seems kind of fascist to me. But also, look at this guy. He's not exactly a honky. So stay with me. I know that fascism is seen as being associated with the Nazis and hating Jews. And, you know, Donald Trump is certainly not a white supremacist.
This is, not only is this true, you got to be real careful with this. Because when progressives or lefties fixate on being anti-fascist, I don't know if they're actually anti-fascist or if they're just against... Again, it's like the anti-Semitism thing. They're not opposed to anti-Semitism. They just don't like white supremacy. And white supremacists are often anti-Semitic. But if the supremacists became anti-Semitic but dropped the white supremacy, so like a lot of the pro-Palestinian people, then they all of a sudden they don't care anymore about it. Same thing with fascism. Fascism doesn't have to have a racial element. Or rather, we should view the category of race as being more flexible than a lot of people think it is. You can have an ethnically diverse group of people that are highly nationalistic and xenophobic that can still be fascist. That's a good point. So careful, because when lefties fight against fascism, they might not actually be fighting against fascism. They're just fighting against their perception of some other embodiment of like white supremacy. So careful to keep in mind.
And he certainly doesn't hate Jews, so how could you call him a fascist? Well, fascism really got a bad name from the Nazis. I feel like as soon as I say that sentence, I shouldn't continue the thought. But if you just look at fascism as an ideology, there's nothing that says it has to be racist. Like, let me read you a quote, okay? I know I'm losing you. Let me read you a quote. Race, it is a feeling, not a reality. 95% at least is a feeling. Nothing will ever make me believe that biologically pure races can be shown to exist today. National pride has no need of the delirium of race. Benito Mussolini, fascism inventor, guy that invented fascism in a basement, in a garage with just a dream and a couple of guys. This is like the creator of fascism explicitly saying race is mostly gobbledygook. Now, this was shortly before he got little broed into being racist by Hitler, but you know, Hitler ruined a lot of things: the pencil mustache, the Roman salute, fascism as a concept. Previous attempts to do any sort of white supremacy in the States have been completely untenable because America is not exactly racially pure. It never really has been. You can do white supremacy in Europe, probably. I don't know. I don't live there, but in the West, in the New World, it's not exactly the cream of the genetic crop, okay? Blood and soil means nothing to Amerimuts. If a white European is like, my ancestors have been here for 5,000 years, I almost kind of like want to give that guy a little bit more credence than like a white supremacist in America who's just like, my great-grandfather was Protestant. You know, for better or worse, they're just not capable of doing an actual white ethno-state. They're too mixed, okay? They're too mixed. That's why any successful fascist movement stemming from America has to be post-racial. Throwing the morality of this aside, it's just like logically...
This is like it's an ironic talking point for a lot of these movements too. This is true. I pointed this out kind of tongue-in-cheek with how diverse the Nazis are today in the United States. You kind of are past your ordinary racial categories if you look at a lot of kind of the neo-Nazi fascist movements that exist in the United States today, yeah.
It has to be post-racial. It's not going to work if it's not post-racial. You need a broad, multi-ethnic coalition under a far-right leader, which is what's happening with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a fascist. I know. You don't like that. Wait, but relax, okay? And that's a good thing. Look, I was always very hesitant to call Donald Trump a fascist in his first term. I was very careful to always refer to him as fash-ish. I think the second term he's more fascist though. Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Even the tariff stuff is like just center economically in the exact same way that like, you know, fascist economics is neither free market capitalist nor communist. Like authoritarian center economic policy. I mean, come on, it's fascism. You're using the power of the state to persecute your political opponents, and to excise undesirables from your nation, which in this case is immigrants. That's the outgroup instead of Jews, because we love Jews now. That's fine. You can play these linguistic games where you're like, actually, I love Jews, so how am I a fascist? That was just Nazis, okay?
Yeah.
You can still be fascist. That's fine. Be fascist.
It's almost like maybe we just even toss the word fascism and we just think of something else, I guess. Yeah.
But we're doing post-racial fascism now. That's what's happening. Sorry, I'm being very schizophrenic right now, but let me give you some more examples, okay? Nick Fuentes, I'm generously going to call him off-white, and I'm generously going to call him asexual, okay? That's a charitable interpretation. Candace Owens, again, fair to call her fascist, I think. Note the complexion. Kanye West, do I have to make the argument why this guy is a fascist? Please. Sneeko, mutt. Andrew Tate, mutt. Most of the followers of Andrew Tate are like brown or mutts or whatever. Look, I can say it, okay? I can say these people are mutts. I'm a mutt, all right? No one's more racist than mixed race people, I know. So all these characters, Kash Patel included, they rally around Trump, who despite being the honkiest of them all, doesn't really say very much about race. He's actually a very good post-racial conduit. You know, he says lots about Chinese and Mexicans. You could probably make the argument that he is personally racist in some ways.
Trump really does focus more on the nationalistic and like xenophobic aspects rather than the purely racial ones that you would kind of expect from somebody that, if you wanted to call them like a crazy fascist or whatever, right?
But sometimes when he says nobody loves black people more than him, I believe him. At no point did he ever say, we're going to build a wall for the whites and the darkies are going to...
It's also why you get a lot more fixation on like anti-South Americans or anti-Indian racism than you do anti-black racism. Because ironically enough, a lot of these fasci people or fasci-adjacent people actually view blacks or view African-American culture as being a little bit more endemic. A lot of these guys are younger. A lot of them grew up listening to people like Kanye West and shit. It's hard for them. Like they're not of the same, they're not cut from the same cloth that the older conservatives were that hated rap and hated rap culture and all of that. These are like Zoomers or younger millennials that kind of grew up in that culture and they like that culture. So they have to kind of protect it or save it a little bit, yeah.
Pay for it. He just genuinely seemed to be going for a post-racial American fascism. But how could a white guy be actually, representing a lot of the interests of ethnic minorities such that the black vote goes from 7% to 21% over the course of 8 years? The answer is simple. It's because Donald Trump isn't white. He's orange. In conclusion, diversity...
Wow, Rapsy, thanks for the 11th month Cyber Streak, tier 5.
...is fascism's strength. Which is true. It's true. Fascism is way more tenable when you have a multi...
Was hoping Destiny would cover the hack stuff. What is there to cover? That was like such a long video, bro. That video was so long. Did he like kill somebody or rape somebody? Is there like some crazy shit in there or...
ethnic coalition of people being fascist. You can just appeal to way more people and get way more public support behind you. Fascists when diversity is their strength. And again, ideologically, this isn't coming out of nowhere. Mussolini's The Doctrine of Fascism explicitly is not about race. It's about nation. Ideologically, those are separate sliders. Nation slider, racism slider. Separate sliders. You could be fascist and even anti-racist, like hypothetically. So post-racial fascism might actually just be a stepping stone into actual white supremacist movements.
Can you explain the bit here? I don't think there is a bit here. I think it's just giving a serious political analysis, which I agree with everything so far.
And it really makes you wonder, like, are people like Andrew Tate and Vivek Ramaswamy going to be clapping as they get pushed up against a tree and strung up? The fundamental question with post-racial fascism is how solid is a multi-ethnic fascist coalition? We have no idea. We don't know. It hasn't really ever been tried. Maybe Brazil integralism, maybe, but I don't think it's really ever been tried on this scale, especially not in such a big way.
Oh, shit.
And it's entirely possible that it's not a viable coalition at all. And that post-racial fascism as a concept is inherently flawed. A leftist would make this argument that like the system itself is white supremacist, and so fascism as a result of being a far-right ideology reinforcing some parts of the system is just reinforcing those white separatist, white nationalist tendencies, and that a lot of the dark people who are advocating for fascist stuff have to pay a lot of lip service and honky dick sucking. The White Lives Matter stuff with Kanye West and Candace Owens. It's kind of a lot of like I'm bending the knee to whitey kind of thing. And, Vivek Ramaswamy did have this interview with Ann Coulter. You remember this?
I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that. And it's directly related to what you were just talking about. The thing about nationalism, you're totally right. It is like to use the word nationalism. Oh, Taylor.
And, after seeing that, you kind of have to be like, okay, well, if you get pushed up against a tree and strung up, you sort of deserve it.
Yeah.
You sort of deserve it.
do.
Because a honky-ass Karen was racially demeaning you, and you're like...
And you're just kind of
okay,
sit there and took it.
That's fine. You're allowed to think
I could go through these and have, my little legal pad where I'm typing up my debate notes. How about this, though? You're Indian.
Pathetic. It's a pathetic way to be. Anyways, all in all, I'm pretty bullish on post-racial fascism. I think it's going to do better and better, especially as the climate crisis worsens and more refugees are forced onto the shores of Western nations who respond with a quick bracca. This is me killing immigrants. I just want to make that really clear. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying it's kind of an inevitability of the paths that we've decided to go down. Okay, moving to a different section of the political compass here, we have a new emerging tribe on the libertarian right that I'm going to exemplify as the efficient accelerationist crowd. Efficient accelerationism is an outgrowth of the effective altruist movement, which in turn comes from this forum called Less Wrong. I will one day make a chart of all of the different, ideological substrates that came from the Less Wrong forums and all the different, splinter groups and movements that came out of that intellectually. But there's too many of them right now, and I can't make that chart right now. I don't have enough information. Efficient accelerationism is one of these outgrowths of the movement. Effective altruists are a little skittish on AI. They think we need to regulate it. Efficient accelerationists go the opposite direction and say, let's go faster and faster. Using this group just kind of as a microcosm of the broader techno-optimist movement, which typically aligns with right libertarianism. Capital makes the AI go quicker. Efficient accelerationists are one of the very few truly optimistic tribes emerging right now. They're super optimistic. They're hope core. They're happy pilled. And I've always viewed the efficient accelerationist optimism as a little weird when you start looking at it deeply, because accelerationism didn't emerge over the last 5 years. It's been around for like 20 years, and it's made by this guy, Nick Land, whose vision of the future, and this is where accelerationism comes from, is not optimistic. I mean, it's optimistic if you're if you think that reality progressing quicker and quicker until we get to a post-human singularity where every human aspect of yourself gets removed because it's not efficient enough. Unless you think that's a good thing, what are the techno-optimists optimistic about? What is the future that they're happy to be accelerating towards? Is it going to be me benefiting from the technology, or is it going to be some abstract form of my intelligence benefiting from the technology? Because that's an important distinction for me. So I think some effective accelerationists are genuinely thinking oh yeah, AI is going to reverse climate change and it's going to make all of our lives better. We're not going to have to work, but humans will still be humans. I also think a lot of them are kind of somewhat aware of the fact that the process of technology is a process of efficiency that does not respect your flesh and actually hates your flesh because it's inefficient, and you should become a more efficient node in order to better be a conduit of capital. I think that's probably more likely where we're headed, and that was Nick Land's analysis, which I tend to agree with more than these newer incarnations of accelerationism. Then again, I'm a hopeless pessimist, so maybe I just hate optimists who have positive visions of the future. Oh wait, no, it's because I hate tech bros. I forgot. In conclusion, the efficient accelerationists and the tech optimists are optimistic, but maybe they're optimistic for a future in which there's no room for anything recognizably human left. That being said, lib-right taking massive W's. I'll give them that. It's probably if you had to pick a tribe in terms of how many W's you're getting, lib-right's probably a pretty good bet. They actually are achieving some praxis in terms of building these network states and building up the network states in such a way where things are actually there's some cool things happening because they have money. And when you have money, you can do a lot of cool stuff, like buy up an island and start to slowly terraform it into a libertarian paradigm. Whereas if you're a communist, you want a stateless, classless, worldwide, moneyless society. Okay, I don't see how that's happening. Moving on to the middle of the political compass, we have reactionary centrism. This is a new political tribe which is very aware of the extremism as a threat to the status quo. So seeing how polarized and extreme things have become, the reactionary centrist kind of pulls inward, draws a line around the Overton window and says, this is my base now. So normally, the center left and the center right, they're each other's worst enemies, and they fight each other. That's the two-party system that at work, a center left party and a center right party. Normally that's how it works, but now that extremism is more relevant, especially online.
Did I see my chat or see his chat yesterday with Pisco? No, link it, but we can watch that next if you want.
You get a phenomenon of people who are reacting to extremism with centrism. Someone center left like Destiny and center right like J.J. McCullough find themselves agreeing
Whoa.
on like every point now because they agree generally broadly America is good and extremism is bad, and like those are just to them some of the more important points to talk about.
Based.
So you have their, they have their conversation where they are sucking each other's dicks. This is big tent, pro status quo stuff. Typically, it's a bunch of policy wonks.
Hell yeah.
A lot of like YIMBY versus NIMBY discourse
Hell
in this
yeah.
world. This is the big neoliberal tent. This
True.
has like the never Trump guys in it who are voting, Democrat, and the center left liberals, the abundance policy kind of people. And what they all have in common, despite, moderate differences from being status quo people, is that they're all part of the status quo. They all broadly like America. They all broadly support a lot of the trends that things were headed in before Trump. And you get this weird kind of like patriotism on like the center left where people are saying, yeah, like U.S. foreign interventionism is good, and I like America as an empire, and I like all these things about America in different ways. And we're the real patriots, and the far right actually hates America.
True.
You get this kind of rhetoric going. You see people in this camp often talking about the dangers of the far right and the far left.
True.
Although right now, because Trump's in power, obviously they talk a lot more about the far right. But if the far left ever got in power, you can bet your ass these motherfuckers would be trying to fuck the far left over. Okay,
Hell
that definitely happened. Right now, they're viewing the far right as more of a genuine threat, and the far left as more of a nuisance. But that could change. We're keeping an eye on things. We'll see how far the pendulum swings back. Let's just unlike basically every other emerging political tribe here, these people actually like America. Obviously, like the tech bro libertarian people want no state to govern them, which isn't completely funded by money. And the post-racial fascist people are like, America sucks, it's failing, we need strong borders, we need to make it better. And the left obviously hates America because they're the left and they hate America. These crackers are without a hint of irony right in for a Biden. Centrists are by definition unimaginative and out of touch. And the mainstream Hollywood elite that's despised by basically everybody is a pretty good example of this. Reactionary centrists are unique and unique in this political time because extremism used to be like in response to centrism and like more on the fringe. And now that it's more mainstream, centrism is more on the fringe. Because the Overton window, you see, is shattered in two and drifts simultaneously left and right at the same time while leaving the centrists out of the Overton window. So basically, it's a reaction. It's them trying to grab both sides of the Overton window as it's, falling in either direction, pulling them apart, and they're just trying to hold it together. But this is kind of the first time where centrism becomes in reaction to the excesses of both sides. And that can only happen when both sides are gaining in power. So good job, extremists. Massive W's. And the reactionary centrists typically fight for the individual's right to be more or less politically unconscious and just sort of enjoy their society passively without having to be a communist or a fascist or some shit. Okay, moving on to the left side of the political compass, we have the balkanized left. Vosh, Hassan, Hawes, H3H3. What all these people have in common with each other, that's right, they all hate each other. This is partially because they're all streamers, and streaming is an inherently degenerate medium, which forces you to become isolationist and anti-human and hate everybody. That's just objectively true. But also, it's kind of a microcosm of left-wing infighting. We continue to see a balkanization pattern on the left, all these different disparate groups spiraling off into infinitely small subgroups. Left-wing infighting is nothing new, of course. There's been infighting on the left as long as there has been a left. And I will also say, there's infighting on the right, too. A lot of leftists think that the left is the only place with infighting. But that's because they're on the left, and they don't critically examine or inhabit right-wing spaces. When you're in right-wing spaces, you see there's plenty of right-wing infighting too. I will say there's probably more infighting on the left because ideological purity is just more important to leftists. But and also most right-wing infighting is calling each other Jews. But there's all kinds of different disparate factions here. There's the woke left, there's the woke left that's not really leftist because they're actually...
I remember 5 or 6 years ago when the alt-right was the popular thing. The entirety of the alt-right's infighting was just everybody accusing everybody else of being a fucking fed. That was 90% of all infighting from these people.
Just woke liberals. There's the post-woke left. There's the anti-woke left. There's the anti-woke left that's so anti-woke that they somehow became capitalist and now in no way resemble a leftist in any shape or form. Of course, that's not including the 1,000 tanky islands of the Maoists and the Stalinists and the DPRK supporters and the ultra-leftists. There's too many to get into, okay? We'd be here all day. Personal example, I canvassed for Jamal Bowman, who's reasonably as pro-Palestine as you could possibly get within the Democratic Party.
Jesus.
Allied with people like AOC and stuff. And even he was protested by further left Palestine supporters who...
Jamal Bowman was protested by far-left people? Is that true? I thought he had a pretty crazy stance on the Palestine stuff. Jesus, if that's true.
Protested him instead of the Zionist candidate he was running against, who was getting like $20 million of Israeli money. They protested the guy that they could, affect more because he cared about them more. So, average day living in left land, okay? This is just like standard stuff. These people are like ravenous cannibals. But moving on, we now have the Horseshoe. This is the last coalition I'm going to talk about. Remember this guy that shot Trump? Did we ever figure out what his political leaning was? Why did we never figure that out? He was never clearly a left-winger or a right-winger. Could it be that he was neither, that he was a Gen Z sort of nihilist, mentally ill person who just wanted to do political violence? I am going to claim Matthew Thomas Crooks, Trump assassin, as our own. He is a horseshoe coalitionist, accelerationist, nihilist, who literally looked up the closest guy to him to see if he could kill him. He would have killed Biden. He would have killed a UK royal if he So I'm officially claiming Thomas Matthew Crooks as our guy. I'm also claiming Luigi Mangione as our guy. These are horseshoe people. They do not neatly fit into the left or the right. They are fueled by a nihilistic accelerationist violence. And that is, I think, probably going to define the horseshoe. But there's other ways of defining the horseshoe too, something like MAGA communism, the Nazbols of our time. So whether it's just little moments like the 3%ers joining Black Lives Matter protesters against the police, or just a general hatred of America and agreeing on certain aspects of American foreign interventionism and foreign policy that the far left and the far right can both agree on, we are seeing plenty of opportunities for tenable alliances between extremes, especially with like individual policies rather than broad worldview. We're in the age of AI and internet tribes sort of amplifying every possible worldview one could have. And it's interesting to see like the interconnectedness of people who are ostensibly very opposed to each other sort of agreeing on different points. Opinions about AI or copyright or how social media algorithms work, these often fall outside of kind of binary left-right things that sometimes like a lot of different people can agree on from different tribes. And so the best example of this, I think, is actually the TikTok ban, because the TikTok ban was trying to be passed by center-left and center-right people who were afraid of the status quo and of China. And the far right and the far left thrive on TikTok. It's great for extremism. And so the farther left wing of the Democratic Party and the farther right wing of the Republican Party were both voting to keep TikTok. This is what we call a horseshoe coalition. It's real and true. I want to close this meta update by telling you about I was in New York, and my vice mentor, Joshua Citarella, was telling me about this group that hosts debates in New York. And the neoliberal status quo assumption behind why you would host a debate is to find middle ground between two different ideologues and say, well, we can all agree that this is the truth or this is a middle ground between the truth. But the point of these debates in New York were being hosted specifically for anti-centrist libertarian purposes, which is to show that the left-wingers and the right-wingers have completely fundamentally different worldviews and are not compatible with each other and should have a national divorce, should separate into micro-states, should buy up islands and territory and, just go into separate worlds. And that's very beneficial to the libertarian tech bro type who thrives off our division. So the leftists get their nation and the rightists get their nation. And this is, at its core, debate used for anti-centrist purposes to give more credence to both sides simultaneously instead of trying to water them down and reach some sort of resolution in the middle. And I think you'll see a lot more of this kind of stuff as time goes on. In conclusion, things are getting more extreme. The center is reacting to them. The right has dropped racism and is now multi-ethnic. The left continues to eat itself and is whiter than ever, and we'll probably see a lot more of this kind of shit to come. So let me know if you want a deeper dive into any of these factions. We can make a longer video about any of them, because I'm sort of just grazing the surface of a lot of different political tribes. I could talk all day about any of these five, so let me know.
This is actually a really good breakdown on a lot of different things. I don't think a lot of people would be willing to admit that the fascism that exists on the right now is kind of post-racial, that they have kind of moved on from just being racist into kind of more advanced forms of xenophobia or whatever. I think that's a big point a lot of people miss, but